If you normally listen to the So Frickin Healthy podcast, you may want to watch this episode in video format due to the very visual nature of this topic. You can find the video of this episode on our YouTube or Spotify podcast channels. Welcome to another episode of the So Frickin Healthy Podcast. I'm Megan McCrory, and I am usually joined by my fellow health coach, Donna Levy-Hoffman, but unfortunately she could not be here for this episode. But fear not, her potty mouth and sarcasm will return in the next episode. Today we have the honor of hosting not one, but two guests. And as you've probably seen from the title of this episode, we are talking about our back health today. And we are joined with Esther Gokhale and Julie Johnson to talk about the Gokhale Method and how to end back pain. I'm going to bring them on now. Thank you, ladies, for being here today.
Hi, Megan. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Same here.
Yay. So nice to see you, ladies. We're recording this in July and we're all very hot. Both literally and figuratively. So we're going to hop right into this. Esther, I'm going to go ahead and start with you. Obviously, this method is named after you, the Gokhale Method. Why don't you go ahead and tell us about the Gokhale Method and how it uses posture to address back pain?
So it's based on an observation that people in indigenous cultures and people in ancestral populations and very young children have some features, posture features in common, movement characteristics in common, and that those make sense, and that those happen to be the populations who don't have very much back pain at all, in sharp contrast to modern industrial populations who have crazy high rates of all kinds of musculoskeletal problems and have very differently shaped spines. So the conclusion is that these very different populations sharing the same spinal shape, ways of bending, ways of walking, are actually exhibiting what's natural, what's normal, what's healthy for our species. And that in modern times, we've more or less forgotten how to be in our bodies. And that this is the reason we have so much degeneration and arthritic change and pain, dysfunction. And that by studying these other cultures and emulating their ways of being in their body and their ways of moving, that we can restore our lives to something much more enjoyable, something much more functional than the average person experiences. It's very sad how much we suffer, and we think it's largely unnecessarily. And so what the Gokhale Method has done is chart a very efficient, a very effective way of getting people back to the kind of posture we used to have in olden times, the kind of posture we used to have when we were little tots, the kind of posture that some of our counterparts in non-industrial cultures still have.
Doing research to get ready for this episode, it was very easy for me to find lots of videos where you've already kind of explained and demonstrated some of the posture that you're talking about. For me, what you're talking about in terms of a visual is seeing a young infant sitting up on the floor. For me, that's because you see an infant and they're just sitting straight up. Their back is just perfect. And at some point during our childhood, we start to get out of that. But is that the correct kind of imagery that you would say to explain for obviously a listening podcast what you're talking about?
Yeah, that resilience, that sturdiness, and yes, they're the characteristics of being straight in the back with the behind. If you look at a little child, their rump, their bottom is out back. And so I coined the phrase J spine to capture those characteristics, the straightness of the upper lumbar spine and going into the thoracic and cervical spine, and then the behind being behind. So this is in contrast to an S that we in modern times have mistakenly come to believe is the desirable shape for the human spine. And Julie, maybe you can show us the contrast of the modern spine and the spine illustration from an older anatomy book to clarify this. That would be great. The part that we don't ask modern people to emulate is sitting on the floor. That part you have to have grown up with in order to be able to do. So here you have it. On the right is an illustration from a text published in 1911. And you see at the very bottom, you can see how the behind is behind. And then the lumbar spine is pretty straight. On the left, you see an illustration from a modern anatomy book, and it's way more curvy-wurvy. And it doesn't really make sense because you can see that even at the baseline, the discs are getting compressed, the edges of the bones are stressed against each other, which encourages calcium deposition, so creating arthritis. It just doesn't hold up under scrutiny. But, when we have these generally accepted paradigms, we don't scrutinize them. It was 600 years we believed that the earth was flat. And somehow, that held on for 600 years. Well, this paradigm needs to be upgraded as well. This S-shaped spine, which determines the shape of our ergonomic chairs, which asks our car seats to have lumbar cushions, and so on. It's just wrong. And I think it's at the root of a lot of our problems.
So, how could moving from there, because with the image on the screen and for people who are listening, it's a very slight difference. Like if you had just shown me the one on the right, the old one, I would have said that's the same as today. But obviously,
Oh,
when you
wow.
have them next to each other, you can see
Yes.
that there's a difference. But I mean, to the untrained eye, you've been doing this for
Yes,
25
yeah.
years. So for you, the back is very, it's a very,
Well, I'll tell you what it makes a big difference to is the discs and the nerves. It's not a small difference to the discs and the nerves in there. They're getting squished and impinged and such.
Mhm.
If you zoom in, then you can see that it's really huge problem for the elements of the spine. But yeah, to an untrained eye, doesn't seem like a big deal. But yes, it is to those parts. And
Maybe it's a good thing, Esther, to point out. This is how I like to explain it, being based in Germany, where we like our sausages. I explain to people that you imagine the way a disc would like to be is like a cylindrical piece of sausage. If you take a sausage and cut it into slices, these are kind of the pieces that want to slot here in between the vertebra, right? These little spaces here are the vertebra, and they'd like to have even pressure up and down. And Megan, I think that would make it a bit clearer that you can see these cylindrical spaces that are the discs here in this 1911 medical image. And I have a German Brockhaus here at home that has the same spine shape. You can see they all have enough space and room. Whereas here, you see triangular shapes where the discs here are getting squished.
yes.
So how did we evolve then? Like what are some of the main factors in the evolution of our spine? Because people were sitting in 1911, right? We've been sitting for way longer than 1911. So what has shifted in just the last 100 years to cause this kind of a shape shift in our back? And why is the medical industry promoting this S shape? Or I'm sorry, maybe I'm assuming, are they promoting the S shape?
I mean, they're just illustrating what is commonly understood to be normal. There's no promotion here. There's just a lack of understanding. You mentioned evolution. So this L5S1 disc is actually wedge shaped. And When we went from being quadrupedal creatures to becoming bipedal, something shifted. And that L5S1 disc is what shifted the most.
Mhm.
Yeah. And it is now a wedge shaped disc, and the other ones are cylindrical. So there's a perfect fit. When we go to an S-shaped spine, that bottom disc is severely compressed when we tuck our pelvis, for example, which is a commonly taught thing. And the other ones, as Julie mentioned, are like squished into a wedge-shaped space. So there's just generally a misfit. So how did this happen? Well, I think what happens is that the illustrations in the anatomy texts tend to reflect what is average in a population.
Mm.
No? So when you have some deviation and it becomes very broad, then it finds its way into up the echelons of society, lay culture and even medical culture. So the way an illustrator would decide how to draw this is they look at x-rays or they look what's around and they assume that what's around is what's normal. So it happens in a lot of fields of medicine that we mistake average for normal and even ideal. And then people get shepherded in this direction. But when we have an 85% incidence of back pain, you don't want to shepherd people towards the average. You want to go back in time. You want to look at other cultures. You want to look at more functional examples to decide what's ideal.
Mhm.
So I think that's what's happened in modern times is that as our furniture and fashion sort of dictated certain trends like tucking the pelvis, think flapper era, where it became fashionable to tuck the behind and be very flat in the backside. That got adopted in the fashion industry, in chair design. Then you also have modern populations transplanted, like think about the US, where I am, that's all transplants, right? So a lot of kinesthetic characteristics ideally get passed down in an unspoken way. It's like grandparents are holding grandchildren at a certain way. It's not articulated, but there's a look and a feel and that's what gets passed down. Grandfather is out in the fields bending over, and we are naturally a monkey see, monkey do kind of species. We copy what's around.
Mhm.
And then when you transplant the population all over the place, we lose that unbroken kinesthetic thread of wisdom. And people start becoming more subject to fashions, to the way a chair is designed, to the way people are holding their babies or the strollers, umbrella strollers or the car seats, all really, really poorly designed in modern times. And so we've sort of lost our wisdom on how to be in our bodies.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that Donna and I talk about regularly is knowing your body, like listening to your body. A lot of people don't listen to their body. They may think they do something and then they wonder, well, why do I feel like that? And oftentimes the connection's not made. And I think what you're talking about is also along that same lines of just listening to your body, trying to feel yourself and get to the point where you can start to understand how your body is moving. And you sometimes use the word like slot it in like it should be like a puzzle. You just put it into the right place and then your body should just naturally be able to hold itself there without the pressure of muscles and feeling the angst of standing up straight and sitting up straight and then 2 seconds later slouching again because your back hurts because you're doing it very viciously, almost like you're like just throwing your back into a different position, rather
Mm.
than feeling it out and putting it into the right place.
So I agree. And thank goodness we still have our sense of self. Like we can tell when something feels good And we can also tell when it feels bad. I mean, that's what pain is all about. Nature took millions of years to design pain to help give us signals about how things are doing in our body. But unfortunately, I think in modern times, we have gotten so profoundly lost. It's not just that we don't know how to be in our bodies, but the signs are pointing the wrong way. We're being given really counterproductive directions, like sit up straight, like chest out, chin up, like tuck the pelvis, like do crunches to help your ab strength, you know. But there's a lot of counterproductive folk wisdom about, well, I shouldn't say folk wisdom, it's lay guidelines on how to go about posture. And so it's really difficult. We don't even know how to interpret our pain. Or we just want to slap it away, take a med and cover it up, and because we don't know how to interpret it. And so I think we're not just lost, but we're profoundly lost. And it really helps to have some well-informed wisdom that's rare, and this is what our company is trying to do. Is our very dedicated group of teachers all over the world are trying to bring this wisdom on how to be in your body.
And now we will hear from Julie, who is actually one of your teachers. Julie, I think, has a pretty good story to tell as well, because it's one of those was the student, now is the teacher type of scenarios where Julie had some back pain. Julie, can you tell us about your experience, what the back pain that you had, how it kind of impacted your life, and what steered you towards the Gokhale method? And then, obviously, now you're a teacher, so obviously you're fully converted to this method. So tell us your story.
Yeah, I don't think there are many people more passionate about the Gokhale method and getting the message out than I am, although there are many holding my hand with this passion. I had back pain, I think first when I was 20. I was carrying some heavy boxes and I had, I think you call it lumbago, don't you? It's very, very bad back pain. Went to the doctor for the first time when I was on my year abroad in Germany during my first bachelor's degree. And since then, people would say to me, don't carry heavy things, be careful, because I'd have back pain regularly and it would last a while. Wasn't so bad in my early 20s, but it became to be a big problem when I was pregnant, age 30, with my twins. And my body was in good enough shape to hold the pregnancy up until the end of week 40. So I'm not tall, but I weighed 19 kilos at the end. I had a huge belly, I could put a plate here. And I would have desperately needed to have known Esther at that point in my life and learned how to anchor my ribs, the inner corset. I'd have needed a few techniques and I'd have got through pregnancy wonderfully, but I didn't. And I was in horrible, horrible back pain to the extent that I couldn't get my babies out of their bed for feeding. I had them lying next to me in my bed. I just couldn't lift them, couldn't carry them.
Mm.
And I had attacks of back pain very regularly for the next 20 years. And I did what everybody does. I took up yoga and I did yoga for 18 years. And in the beginning, it helped me to some extent, for sure. But over time, it got worse. And I thought I need to do something more. And exercise is something that we all think we all need to do. So I did lots and lots of exercise 3 times a week. I did a sort of yoga inspired, they call it body art, sort of aerobic, body strength, very intense workouts. But by 2015, I'd got to a stage that whenever I did yoga or I did my sports class, my back pain was excruciating. And my right arm was kind of numb and tingly. My right leg and calf and foot was numb and tingly. And when I turned in my bed at night, I woke up every time kind of cringing with tears in my eyes and pain. And
Mm.
I didn't want to have a back operation. I tried osteopathy, I tried physiotherapy, I tried acupuncture. And a colleague at work had said, you need to go for spiritual spine alignment. And the guy holds his hand over your spine and then it helps. And I don't like esoteric stuff, not one bit. I like to kind of understand what's happening or But I was so desperate. I was even thinking of visiting this guy because I was in tears giving up my beloved yoga and my sports. And I think I spent every free moment that I had Googling back pain and back pain solution. And in the end, the solution came from my yoga teacher. She
Mhm.
said at the end of one of the yoga classes that we expect a lot of our yoga class if we imagine that 1.5 hours a week is enough to solve all of our back pain. And that the spirit of yoga is about mindfulness and that we should observe ourselves in our everyday lives and take this practice of mindfulness into what we do at work, in the evenings, and so on. And that got me thinking. And I observed myself at work at my desk, how I started the day, as we said, upright and straight, sitting at my desk. And then over the course of the day, I'd sort of crumple until late in the day. I was kind of hanging in there. And I kind of thought, maybe this is not ideal. Maybe this is somewhere where I could work. So I Googled posture and I found all sorts of incredibly weird devices and things, but thank goodness I found Esther on YouTube. I found her TED talk that she gave at the University of Stanford and thought, thank goodness for that. This is a totally logical approach. And to spend $20 on a book is not a big investment. I bought Esther's book, read it from cover to cover within 24 hours, and started working with the techniques and found, my goodness, it actually helps. So I worked with the book for a couple of months, then realized that I need a bit of help. Learning things from a book. I don't know
Mm.
how many people have successfully learned tennis or golf or whatever from a textbook. You need a bit of coaching to get into the details. And I drove a long way to Wolfsburg to my German colleague, Gokhale Method teacher, Esther Pohl, and did the foundations course with her. That was 2016. And I don't have back pain anymore. It's just gone. And nowadays, you can't see them in the background, but I like my weights and kettlebells. I like intense exercise. If there's something heavy needing carrying, I kind of am in there to prove the men that it doesn't have to be, just men that can carry heavy things. And my back is just good. I'm as fit and healthy at 55 as I've ever been. To cut a very long story a little bit shorter, I joined Esther when she came to Europe 2017, 2018 for alumni events or for extra training because it just fascinated me so much. And Esther asked me 2018 if I would consider becoming a Gokhale Method teacher. And I said to her, I'd love to be a Gokhale Method teacher, but I need another 10 years. I'm not really good enough yet. And she gave me a hug and said, no, you're good enough. And I'd like you to think about it. And I realized that there was a little voice in me that said, go for it. This is something you really, really want to do.
Yeah.
So I flew to Palo Alto 2019. And yeah, now I'm not only a Gokhale Method teacher, but since last year also work for Esther full time. So
Wow.
it's
So truly changed the course of your life in many different areas of your
Mhm,
life.
totally.
Yeah. It's amazing when you let yourself be open to opportunities. And you never know, one little decision, one click somewhere on the internet, and it can set your life in a different trajectory than what it was before. And I think um
Totally.
Happily for us,
yeah.
happily for us in the case of Julie, because she has really taken on a lot of roles and has so much enthusiasm and ability that she's bringing on board. So it's helped us, our organization enormously.
I have a question, a follow-up question. Whenever people change their behavior, we always try to change behavior slowly so that you can stick to it, so it becomes the new normal rather than I'm trying to do something that's
Mhm.
not normal for me. And I feel like, especially something like posture, which people have adopted for a long time, how do you see the success rate of people sticking with the method? And how long does it take someone when they first start using this method? to really become where you stop thinking and your body is just doing what it does naturally? How long does it take from student to where you don't think about it anymore?
I'll take that. It varies a lot from individual to individual and technique to technique. You
Mhm.
know, there's a sweet spot feeling when you discover how to bend or discover how to take your strides, use your glutes. Every step is a rep. It's a powerful feeling. It feels right. It's surprisingly quick for certain things, even big changes to settle in. And then what we discovered over the years is that people do need reminders because the old ways of moving and sitting and bending and so on are all around reinforcing themselves in our visual field and so on. It took us a long time to discover a robust way of creating a reminder system. And the pandemic helped with that. I started before the pandemic, actually coming on screen every day, January 1st, 2020, to remind the alumni of so that they wouldn't forget. And then the pandemic hit, and we realized people were waxing lyrical about how good this reminder program was. And the main feature there was we were reminding people of one little piece every day. So this behavioral change wisdom about breaking things down into little pieces. It's not very burdensome for people to show up. It's a 13-minute lesson. And that program proliferated. So it's now become an exercise program. We dance every day and keep in mind one posture principle. So that has become very, very popular. And that is helping people not forget what they learned in their beginner courses. And we've opened it up to the public even as an exercise program. It's not the best way to learn posture. It's not the best way to get out of back pain. We have other offerings for that. But if people want to exercise in a way that's healthy, that isn't destroying their discs and such, this is a really good program to check out. We have 17 live classes every week. Tai Chi, dance, fitness, yoga. So that's been a big part of helping people keep things on their radar. We've been experimenting for over 2 decades on how to best teach, what order of things to teach people so that it sticks, how well to break things down.
Mhm.
So we feel like that's our one of our major contributions to this field is we've charted an order and we have collected wisdom on teaching, what metaphors to use, hands-on placements when it's in-person classes, tiny pieces of learning when it's online, 13 minutes, and so on.
I think the other thing, the students that learn the fastest, in my experience, are the ones that are in the most pain because they're the most motivated. And the thing is, if you're in terrible back pain, for instance, because you have a habit of parking your hips forward or perhaps of having a very arched back, then if I'm teaching someone and bring them into a healthy alignment,
Mhm.
people will often say they feel like a gorilla or somehow very weird. And I celebrate this because I want people to feel weird. If they're doing what they always used to do, they needn't come to me for a cause. But then they say, this feels so incredibly weird, but it doesn't hurt. And
Mm.
that's an incredibly fast curve then, because if you know what to do, so your body doesn't hurt anymore, so you can suddenly bend without it hurting where it always used to hurt, or if you can stand for 2 hours without being in pain and you know how to do it, then you're automatically going to do it. And
Yeah.
you might slip back a little bit, but you will not slip back to where you came from, particularly if where you came from is causing you a lot of pain. And that's why, in a way, we're going back to how we were when we were 2 years old. We all used to be able to do this. And therefore, in a way, we're relearning something that's innate to us rather than putting on some new habit that's not entirely natural for us. And I think that also aids in the learning process.
Do you want to follow up, Julie, and tell me about a specific story that demonstrates how quickly the method can help someone?
Sure. I mean, I can think of many. I can think of a 27-year-old consultant who had horrible neck pain, who wrote to me on the Monday after the course that it was just gone immediately and that it was the best investment in 27 years to take the Gokhale Method Foundations course. That was very quick and easy. I think my most dramatic experience was with a dear woman who drove all the way down from Hamburg on the train. She couldn't drive a car because she was on very strong painkillers and had been on opiates for 6 weeks because she had a very severely prolapsed disc at L5S1. Her physicians, her doctors had said, you can't keep taking these painkillers and opiates forever. You need to have surgery. You need to have an operation. And she was desperate not to have an operation. And she called me and she said, may she come and take the Gokhale Method Foundations course in person with me in the south of Germany. I said, yes, of course she can come. Made it clear to her that I'm not a therapist, that I'm a teacher of healthy posture, but that I'm not going to do anything to her, manipulate her in any way, and that everything she does that this is an educational intervention. And she understood that very clearly. And she came down. She was in terrible pain and tears when she arrived. It was hugs and tissues as she came into my house. To be honest, I was a little apprehensive. I wasn't a so experienced teacher as I am now, but I followed the course gently with lots of time in between. Obviously, for someone with a severe case like this, a one-on-one course is better than a group course context. And she felt a relief already in the first afternoon. On the second day of the course, she rang my doorbell. She was smiling with a relaxed expression on her face that I had not seen in the previous day. And she said, Julie, you won't believe this, but I've not taken a painkiller nor any of my opiates this morning. I'm okay without them.
Wow.
That's the second day of the course. And it gives me goose pimples when I tell the story still, but she didn't have that operation. And she wrote to me how great it was to be windsurfing in Portugal in the summer. And
Amazing.
she did yoga. She had a good sense of her own body,
Hmm.
but she never bent in any other way ever since she learned the Gokhale Method course, except as a hip hinge. We teach bending, keeping the spine as one unit. And
Hmm.
her bending, putting on her shoes, getting dressed was a cause of excruciating pain. But when she learned our technique of hip hinging, she could even bend down deep and put on her shoes. And that window where she wasn't squishing that prolapsed disc was possible for her to bend pain free. So the logic of the method was so clear to her, of course, that she had no difficulty retaining. Hoping that she'll become a teacher one day. I'm working.
Converting the people to the Gokhale method. It's an interesting story, and it actually gave me the next question for Esther, because I'm a lifelong person who has been going to chiropractic care. My uncle was a chiropractor, and I recently started going to the chiropractor again. And in Switzerland, where I am, osteopath is something that I hear a lot. And like what Julie was just saying about invasive back surgeries, could you maybe put in context how the Gokhale method, chiropractic, osteopathic care, and these more invasive back surgeries, how are these all connected, and where should someone start based on kind of the level of the back pain that they have?
Yeah, I don't think it's so much about the level of pain, but the level of dysfunction. Like if something is severely out of whack, if the person has had an accident, they have broken bones. Thank goodness we have people who have the skills to mend those severe situations. We have surgeons who have dedicated decades of their lives to develop the skills to fix it. And that's also true of all other modalities, like if you have fallen and your bones are actually displaced, thank goodness there are people, chiropractors, who can help put the bones back in place.
Mhm.
But a very large percentage of back problems are because of systematic errors in the way we use our bodies. And we can't expect that a chiropractor or an acupuncturist or a osteopath can make up for that. They might be able to reset things, But then if we just go back to the same old habits, then that's not going to really get to the root of the problem. Ours is the least intrusive intervention.
Mhm.
And so I think everybody needs to know how to be in their bodies, how to sit, bend, and walk and get the positive benefits from these life exercises before we go to a regimen that requires us to take time out of our lives to do special exercises, buy equipment. So ours is the most basic of the interventions for back pain, and
Mhm.
something that I think everybody wants to know about and have as a base. And then when something more complex happens in the accident realm, or if there's a very unfortunate genetic condition, then thank goodness we have the experts to deal with that.
So would you say that if someone who doesn't have chronic back pain, but maybe once in a while their back hurts a little bit, but if a doctor asked them, they wouldn't say, I have back pain. How much benefit would the person who doesn't actually have back pain get to take the time to learn this method now?
Yeah, well, I mean, we'd love for people to come to us for preventive reasons, but it's a rarity. I mean, this is why we have pain, because pain makes us take action. Otherwise, many of us would merrily go our way and sever our nerves and be paralyzed before we did anything, is the truth, you know? So pain is in our face, it's a friend, and it makes us take action. But it's not by the degree of pain that we determine which kind of intervention is needed, because we work with people with severe pain as well as chronic, naggy pain. And we are equally successful with all kinds of levels of pain. It's what the question is, what's at the root of the pain? And people often believe that since they have tried so many techniques, so many methods, unsuccessfully, they must have a very rare, esoteric kind of pain that needs a higher level of expertise. And they're shocked to discover that all of this time, it was the way they were bending and walking and sitting and using their body that was at the root of this problem that stumped so many experts.
Mhm.
Yeah. So,
Absolutely. I've been out of back pain for years now, but I continue to work on my posture, on nuances here and there, because it's a kind of mindfulness practice of actually being in your body, feeling yourself, feeling perhaps a different sense of self. And the other thing, it's totally ironic that I ended up as a posture teacher. I always actually wanted to be a teacher rather than go into business. So that bit fit. But my father was always on to me about posture. And it was always stick your chest out, chin back, kind of this military kind of chin up. And I hated when I was called up and made to sit like this. And I couldn't wait until the adult eyes kind of left my body and I could gently kind of sink into something more comfortable. And the other thing that surprises people incredibly is that healthy posture enables your body to have very good circulation and it enables muscles to be relaxed. So you actually feel better in your body the better your posture is. You feel more relaxed. You feel more, I think I've got more energy than I've ever had before in my life. And I'm not done yet. I'm still working on my posture. Even if someone just says, oh, I've got a bit of a sore neck, or I just love it when someone massages my shoulders and they always come forward when I'm at work, it's totally worth learning the Gokhale method because it gives you a different level of comfort in your body. And we women have been told all sorts of weird things that we're supposed to do, putting our knees together when we're sitting there with our skirts, or to show our cleavage, or to hide our cleavage, or all these kinds of things. Perhaps the Gokhale method is also an invitation to look at from a different angle. We women want to feel comfortable and healthy in our bodies, and that's a good enough starting place. And we could perhaps leave some of the baggage from women generations before us.
Going back to pre-industrial cultures that Esther talks about, typically in Africa and probably I would guess in South America, the way that they move is different. And maybe Esther, you could talk a little bit about the types of work going from how women in different cultures are taught to behave differently and hold our bodies differently. So, how does that translate into cultures where both the men and women have very similar backs or similar ways of using their body for work or for recreation? Maybe you could also talk a little bit about the people who are putting stuff on their heads. Doesn't that compress our spine? How is that helpful?
So, actually, carrying something on your head is one of the more useful cues to line your spine up. I think because we've done it for millennia, I actually believe it's written into our genetic code how to respond to a weight on your head. And Julie is demonstrating our little head cushion, and I will too. We have it ready at hand because putting it there cues the right muscles to work. So, no, it doesn't cause compression. It actually induces your deep abdominal and back muscles to engage, to push up against the weight, the longest colli muscle deep in the front of the neck to push up against the weight. So it's actually giving you healthy exercise, not unhealthy compression and degeneration. And that's true for all the kind of traditional work that happens, but it also carries over to computer desk work. We have this fashion lately of thinking that sitting is the new smoking and sitting harms you, and we should always be escaping one position. The best position is the next position. And that's true. If you do poor posture, then you don't want to stay there long. And you have to kind of frenetically be moving on to the next position. But if you know how to sit or stand at a desk or do any work, sitting, manual work, if you know how to do it well, then there isn't this frenetic need to be moving on to something else to escape this bad posture. So, actually, the statistics for manual workers in modern times are worse vis a vis degeneration of discs and back pain than they are for computer workers. Now, the statistics are bad for everyone in modern times, but they're even worse for manual workers. So, it's not really fair to blame sitting like we tend to for modern back pain and dysfunction. So, in non industrial cultures, people are basket weavers or skinning or preparing food while sitting. It turns out there's research being done on the Hadza tribe in Africa, and it turns out they sit 9 hours a day, just like we do, but they sit well. That's the difference. So I think no matter what job you're doing and how much weight you're carrying, and whether it's sitting at a computer or bending over repeated tasks, we are so capable as a species. We could do all of these things without pain, without dysfunction, with great joy. Being in your body and using it well is just a joyful thing. This graph actually shows degeneration with age. On the x axis, you have age. On the y axis, you have disc narrowing, which is an index of degeneration. And in the middle graph, the middle line shows what happens to sedentary workers, people sitting behind their computers. Sure enough, with age, they suffer degeneration in their discs. But the graph up top is manual workers. And you can see that they're much worse off. This is the basis for me saying that it's not fair to blame our aches and pains on our computer jobs. We all suffer with back issues in modern times. And where you really want to be is in the lower graph with the Bhil tribals of central India. And there you can see that at age 50, the discs are indistinguishable from the 20-year-olds. They have pristine discs. So this is pretty unheard of in modern times. What we want to busy ourselves with is what are they doing differently? Because it isn't that they're genetically different. There's very little variation in spine shape and things like that across the entire human race. This is because they are in a culture where they're reinforcing these wonderful body mechanics and how to lift and how to bend and so on. They know how to be in their bodies, whereas in modern times we've forgotten.
We hear a lot about the brain gut connection and the vagus nerve, which is the main nerve that runs through our back and triggers us to go into fight or flight or rest and digest. So there's a lot of talk about how depression can either be even started from the gut and into the brain. But the point is that it's all connected by the back, right? Everything has to go through the back. And so where does our back health actually start to impact our emotional health in terms of how we're feeling on a day-to-day basis?
The research is just so fascinating. The recent research showing that it's harder to be depressed when you have open upper body posture. It's harder to be anxious. There's a New Zealand study where they using fMRI look at what's happening in the brain in response to these anxiety provoking images. So we know that there's a connection. We've already known it from the animal world. How do you tell how a dog is feeling? Through its posture.
Mm.
Tail tucked between its legs, head hung means frightened, submissive, dejected, and head hung high, tail out back. And the equivalent in the human animal is having your behind, which is what we teach. So we know that that's that connection from observational experience, from studies, and we hear it from our students. Our students will spontaneously come and tell us, I feel much more confident. I have much more energy. I have a different presence in my corporate meeting room. I have to tone it down because I am sitting so much more upright. Things like that. That's actually a particular interest of both Julie and mine. And we are in the process of creating an offering that is in that direction. And it's very, very exciting. We think that we're going to begin with a course on empowerment of women using
Yes.
posture.
I'd
So
like to share one of
excited.
my favorite slides. I think this woman, I just love watching how she holds her body. It's a photo, Esther, that you took many years ago, isn't it?
And she's just drying her laundry. She's not posing, but look at how regal she is, how much self possession she has. It's really wonderful. And that's our birthright for all of us as humans.
Esther, you've been doing this for a long time, 20, 25 years now. Obviously, we talked about the evolution in how you're teaching, in the methods and the timing. How is it going to continue to evolve in terms of our posture? Where do you see the future moving with technology and with the resources that are coming for our back health in general?
We've always been high tech and high touch. And I think both of those need to keep developing. Technology is wonderful and we use it, we lean on it heavily. What we're trying to seed is a culture of good posture, and that takes many touch points. So in the future, we hope that this will be a standard offering in schools
Yeah.
or even earlier for young parents to know how to hold their children because that seeds their way of sitting for the rest of their life. How to parent for good posture is another important direction of growth.
I have a nephew that's in his late teens, and he always had immaculate posture, almost to a point. I think his neck is too straight. His chiropractor told him. But I tend to, this is all my speculation, think that young adults don't think about their back so much because they probably don't have the same amount of back pain just because they haven't been on the earth as long. But how are you going about trying to tap into teenagers and young adults to teach them something that they might not really even care about yet? How do you introduce them to care about their back?
So I would say over half our teachers came into our organization with the desire to spread this to youngsters.
Mm.
And it's a difficult nut to crack because they are overscheduled. Posture is just not a sexy thing, although it is, in fact. but they don't, it's not perceived that way. It's just perceived as something your grandmother would tell you to do. Time is a big issue. We've tried many, many approaches. The most successful has been when parents come in with their kids and it's a family course. That has been really good. We have tried through music teachers, athletic coaches. One of our next projects is a book. As even young parents, they still read. They have a hard time going out to things. And now that we have online offerings, we're much more accessible, you know? It's
Mhm.
like in the throes of raising an infant, it's hard to have access. Technology brings our method to people's homes in a much more effective way than I anticipated. I've been shocked at how effective it is to teach posture online. And I think one of the main contributors is that we can break things down into little bite sized pieces, and people are learning on their own bed and their own pillows and chairs and couches and so on, and they don't have to commute. It's nice. If you have pain, it's harder to commute, but also for children, harder to navigate all of that logistics.
But if we're talking about it in terms of a vision, Esther dedicated her book to the millions who suffer from back pain unnecessarily. And that, I think, is the vision that joins all Gokhale Method teachers and all Gokhale Method fans, that we want back pain to become something that's very rare and not very common. And we want to redefine what people know and see healthy posture to be at all levels of society in all countries and continents of the world. That's our mission, that's our goal. And we're doing that one back at a time, one person at a time. And
One family at a time, one community at a time.
That goes into our last question. I think the most important thing now is, how does our listening audience actually start getting their back healthy? What are the actionable steps that they can take? What's the first thing to do?
Really, how about you talk about lengthening? Like, that's how we began.
yeah, I mean, the first baby step to getting out of pain is to create length in the spine. Kind of think it's normal that we shrink as we get older. And in fact, it's not normal. I regrew a couple of centimeters that I'd shrunk, regained that length. We have tight erector spinae muscles, we have compressed disc. So the first baby step is to learn how to anchor your ribs, because a lot of us are in this kind of S-shaped spine where we have a very big arch in our back. And what we want to learn to do is not tuck our pelvis, but we want to tuck our ribs. So the lower border of my rib cage here is coming down and in, and the upper part of my rib cage is coming up. And that's decompressing my lumbar spine here. And someone that's in back pain will feel that immediately. And that will be the first thing to do before anybody visits a course, would be to start by learning to anchor the ribs and to use, for instance, one of our stretch sit cushions that you can put on the back of a chair, where you can attach yourself to the nubs of the cushion with some traction, and that pulls the skin up and again helps to decompress the spine. And someone with back pain will learn how to stretch sit, and you'll normally hear a big, oh, it's not a big stretch, but it's a very gentle release where the nerves and discs can start to rehydrate. And the worse someone's back pain, the bigger the sigh, generally, in my experience, when someone learns to stretch sit. So, stretch sitting and stretch lying are two techniques described in Esther's book, where you can start to create some length in your spine. Videos are also free of charge on YouTube. The next step would be to invest in this very excellent book. And then, of course, to subscribe to our newsletter, which has a blog that comes out once a month with lots of free posture tips. And if you like, when you subscribe, the newsletter will send you a PDF with a free chapter on the inner corset, which is a technique for using your muscles to create length in your spine. And if you like all of that, I'd love to invite you, Megan, and all your listeners to join a free workshop. I offer free workshops in German regularly, around monthly. And Esther and my colleague Claire in England for European time offer workshops in English. They're free of charge. They last an hour. We generally teach some small techniques, start people getting out of pain and give a little bit of an introduction.
Excellent. Let's not forget your social media because, as Esther mentioned, tidbits and nuggets and beautiful things that can be dropped into your social media feed when you're looking at your phone with the bad posture.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That hashtag head balance challenge, we tend to be a bit serious because we just want to get everybody out of back pain. I think our head balance challenge, anybody who would like to follow it and see me carrying funny things on my head and some of my colleagues, and I'd invite anybody to put something on your head, make sure it doesn't hurt your toe, but try it out. And also follow us on Facebook, on Instagram, on TikTok, you'll find Gokhale Method. And again, you'll have all sorts of tips and inspiration for a healthy posture.
Great. Esther, any last words before we sign off?
No, thank you so much. This is such an important part of getting the message out, having people like you share as with your audience.
Actually, this episode is brought to you by an audience member who wrote to us with a suggestion. And they said, I really want an episode on the Gokhale Method. So, the whole reason I know about these beautiful people in my virtual room is because of you wonderful listeners. So, please feel free to drop us a line, so frickin' healthy at gmail.com. Of course, you can find us on social media as well and let us know what you want to hear. All of the things that we talked about and more are going to be linked in the show notes, whether you watch it on YouTube or you listen to it on your podcast provider. I want to end there and thank Esther and Julie very much for your time. We thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much.